the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it is today that they're having the vote on Kavanaugh. I spent the night stirring about, thinking about all of the various pieces to this, and I've also done some research time, deeper research time on Kavanaugh. It is something that Farmer Jones and I may talk about in the next few days, that and some other issues certainly. So I started to look at what is the good, the bad, and the ugly about this hearing about the whole Kavanaugh business. And I have to tell you honestly, most of it's bad and ugly. And let me give you a why. Obviously, the first part is, let me do the easiest one. The easiest one is that the Democrats have totally dissembled in this process. They have acted like complete idiots. They have narrowed their scope. They have defined their message in terms of Me Too and in terms of the most militant Me Too that's possible. That is to say, not only should these people be believed, but they should, or not only should they be heard, they should be believed, and they should be unequivocally believed, and that unequivocal belief ought to be really, really straightforward. It ought to be a matter of men just stepping aside and letting women have their say. Now, what nobody has brought up is that that also would apply to almost instantly to the pedophilic stuff related to younger men, boys and girls, and it would apply. So if you take the whole Catholic debacle and the claims against priests, you would have those same standards apply there, and it would be wild. I mean, it would be crazy. Anybody who didn't like a priest, anybody who didn't like a coach, a gym teacher, somebody with whom they stayed after school one day doing chemistry or anything else, simply pointing would make it vastly, vastly worse. I mean, there are times when it is almost as horrible to have the false accusations as it is to have had the assaults. Neither one of them. I mean, the cloud upon the individual is just as large for one as the other when you get all done. I'm not making light of sexual assault, not at all. But I can tell you that if it destroys a person's life and livelihood and family, I have friends that I know, and someday perhaps I will share about these people, not this incident, that one of the adopted daughters they had claimed that she had been sexually abused by her adoptive father. Even though there were 6 or 7 kids in the family and there were mounting needs for that family, he had to exit for 6 or 8 months while they investigated to find out that it was all just a story and the guy was not at all culpable in any way. But the disruption to the family, at the very least, and this was not a public figure, was huge. So when I look at the Democrats and I think about the craziness of it, here we have Blumenthal, 10 years the Attorney General in Connecticut, Kamala Harris, 8 years as Attorney General in California, whatever his name is, Dilberry Whitehouse, the Attorney General for 4 years in Rhode Island, Klobuchar, who was the county attorney for Hennepin County, the largest county in Minnesota by population, around Minneapolis and the surrounding area, for a full term, who have been senators. Klobuchar since 07, Whitehouse since 07, Blumenthal since 11, so he's been there for 8 years, and Kamala Harris, who picked up after Barbara Boxer and has been since trying to outbox Boxer in 17. These guys, Blumenthal is a Harvard graduate and a Yale JD graduate. He graduated from Harvard magna cum laude. He served in the military. He claimed to have served in Vietnam. He's got stolen valor, and he is a liar. And he applied that terminology to Kavanaugh, that if you lie once, you lie all. And there's Blumenthal lying about his military service, holding somebody else to the standard that would make him a congenital pathological liar. Liar by definition. So you've got Kamala Harris, who's trying to run for president. She's trying to outpoke Pocahontas to make a bigger splash, and she is in no way qualified. And certainly, if she's the Attorney General and she's going to presume guilt about half of the population, about half the people that would vote, and the other half of the people who care at all about men in any circumstance, fathers, sons, brothers, cousins, it's crazy, total craziness. And then you've got Leahy, the old man from Vermont, Durbin, the goofball from Illinois, Hirono, they must be believed, from Hawaii, who was born in Japan and needs to be sent back, and Baldy Booker, who is also supposedly an attorney, although one would never know it by the way he talks, who claimed both that the judge did not show the proper demeanor, and that there was too much smoke around him. There were too many accusations, and that the accusations alone should disqualify him. And the accusations all came late, all came uncorroborated, all came unsubstantiated, and all came from partisan Democrats at the very end of the process. Had they come early, I would have said, yeah, that's smoke, that's real smoke. And had they met the standard, that would have been a whole different thing as well. And then the second thing he said was, well, we need to get the best possible one. I'm not satisfied that we've picked the best possible one. Well, I hate to tell you, Corey, but if you ever deign to read the Constitution, you'll find out that you don't get to pick. You don't get to pick. You just get to decide. You get to give advice and consent. That is, to give input and then decide whether the person meets the qualifications in some substantive way, which is not defined. But it doesn't give you the authority to say, I'll pick this guy over here. Then you've got the Republicans, and let me go through some of them. You got Flaky Flake, that's the obvious one. Little Snowflake Flake, the guy with the bent nose that could use a little more help, I think. You've got Cornyn, kind of the corny Texan. You've got Graham that stepped up for the first time, mini-me of the no-name pair, that actually did show a backbone, which is quite amazing. I don't know whether it was surgically inserted or not. You got Hatch that's leaving, that has mostly been a fairly intelligent guy. You've got Cruz, who maybe has connections to the Cuban mafia. Goodness, who knows? And then you've got Grassley from Iowa, that I've always kind of thought was a nice guy and he would make a great neighbor, but I didn't really think he was smart enough to be a United States Senator. And I used to compare Iowa to Montana because they had Grassley and Tom Harkin, and I thought, you know, how could you get a stupider pair than that? I have to give more credence to Grassley now, because I compared them to the two senators from Montana who were Conrad Burns. He was an auctioneer. He wasn't a racehorse. This is his quote. He wasn't a racehorse. He wasn't a show horse. He was a workhorse. And I said, no, you're a stupid plow horse. And Max Baucus, the guy whose high point of his life and career was to ride a horse in the rodeo at Miles City the year that he won election in 1978. He never had a high point after that. He looked like, acted like his brain had been disconnected and like he had had too much marijuana. And I've been told that that was the case. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know. But he looked like a stoner to me. So, you know, when you get the Senate bunch here, where where's the good? Well, you got a couple of minutes of Lindsey Graham that was good, and the rest of it was pretty pathetic. And I watched a trial attorney who said that all of the Democratic questioners were basically pretty lame, and I think that's true too. So then you got Blasey-Ford, who comes in and looks like an MK Ultra altered person. She alternately plays a little girl with vocal fry, and then she lifts up on her voice at the end so that you would be inquiring about her and you'd be sure that she was telling the truth. And that's, of course, drives you nuts. And she had no corroboration. The 4 people she named denied it. The date she couldn't come up with, the place she couldn't come up with, whose house it was she couldn't come up with, transportation to and from she couldn't come up with, consistency in her testimony. It changed from 4 guys in the room to 2 guys in the room, mid-80s to early 80s, and the rest of that, and dates were all fumbled around. Her peripheral testimony about planes and other things, about being claustrophobic, obviously was not the case. The polygraph test, which was supposedly 2 questions at the airport after her grandmother's funeral, totally unbelievable, inconsistent, 2 questions, no baseline questions, nothing that follows the standards of a polygraph test. And how many times did she take it? She denies that she had ever helped anybody out. And here, the cross-examiner, Mitchell, that they appointed to question her, obviously had inside information on this, and obviously had the information from her former boyfriend, who said yes, in fact, not only did she know about the polygraph test, but she had helped somebody prepare for one because they were applying, I think, to the FBI. Then you've got fellow party. There are no concurrent utterances which would serve as a marker. In other words, had she said anything to anybody, including the other female that was allegedly there, either concurrently or in the next few weeks, had she ever uttered any misgivings about Kavanaugh, all of that would have been good. She did not report it to the government. She did not report it to the police department or anything else. The lawyers, she didn't know about the lawyers. She didn't know how she was paid. It just goes on and on. 2 doors versus 1. The years that her construction was done, the reconstruction of her memory, all of this is crazy stuff. And let me give you some insight from one of my subscribers, a person whose name begins with S. I'm going to leave it at that. And this person has had an extensive hypnotist exam counsel, and is obviously very knowledgeable, multiple degrees from respected universities. And she said, our teacher, Dr. K, this was at one of the seminars they had, our teacher, Dr. K, chose a young man, Roger, who was deep and well-conditioned subject. He was in real life and extremely outgoing and personable. In front of our class, about 30 hypnotherapists in training, Roger was put into hypnosis and a false memory was inserted where he was taken through a deeply humiliating, albeit fictitious, experience in 1st grade. It was something that, if it had happened to him in real life, would have left emotional scars and caused extreme shyness. So they inserted a memory into him hypnotically, even though it was totally false and had no basis in fact. Roger was then brought back to his normal consciousness, except that he was no longer anything close to the normal Roger we knew and loved. We tried to ask him questions, and he blushed upon answering and was unable to look anyone in the eye. He had gone from cheerful extrovert to extreme introvert in 10 minutes, totally transformed. Then it says, once the point was made, i.e. that even a false memory can create personality problems in a hypnotic subject, Dr. K, the teacher, instructor, put Roger back in hypnosis, removed his memory, then brought him out again, and Roger was normal and had no memory of what had just happened. So what this person said is she thinks Blasey-Ford was hypnotically modified to make this into a traumatic event. And one of the comments that was pointed out by some people that I've watched is that this little voice that cracked and was up, had the uptick at the end, may have been a little girl's voice, where she actually regressed into the little girl she thought she had been, the young child. So all of this is pretty crazy stuff. And then we get to Kavanaugh, and I have resisted getting too heavy on Kavanaugh lately, because I consider him being on the court the lesser of two evils. That is, having total chaos and the election turned upside down, and if Q is to be believed, a delay in the unfolding process of 55,000 sealed indictments and 100 other things. So I have looked for him to pass, recognizing that 5G and all kinds of other stuff is slipping under the woodwork, slipping under the covers, slipping through us while we watch this little grandstand play. There are multiple layers going on at once. Is Syria stuff getting settled out? Is the Iranian stuff getting settled out? How about 5G? How about the weather problems? How about other stuff? How about some of the corporate adjustments that have been made? And other dark things that are going on? What is going on with the economy? But let's go back to Kavanaugh. So the stuff that's problematic about Kavanaugh is that there is some claim that he was helpful in hiding the Vince Foster death. He certainly has connection to George W. Bush, and if you know anything about me, you know Shrubby is at the bottom, down with Obama. The two of them are scrubbing the bottom of the pit of the sewer in terms of presidential material. They are awful. He's supposedly involved at some level in the Patriot Act, which may or may not have been written years before, even before Bush became president, as part of the New Century plan, the plan for a new century. And but it came out within a few weeks. He has problems with search and seizure. He supposedly was a dissenting vote in. There was a guy that had been driving around, and they had planted, without a search warrant, they had planted a bug on his car that was traceable, so that they were able to GPS him wherever he went. And Kavanaugh saw no problem with that as an invasion of his privacy, because it didn't involve invading his speech or his documents or the rest of it, even though it invaded his conduct and where he went, and I just see that as a total violation. If Kavanaugh thinks that's all right, is he going to protect my rights? I'm not sure he is. And there are other claims. I mean, I think he'll hold to the right to bear arms, although you don't know that. He is historically, he and his wife both, his wife is tighter with the Bushes even than he is, a New World Order, global, big government guy. And so was he lying? What has he done about sex, beer, and blackouts? His judicial demeanor and prosecution? You know, he claims that he didn't have sex until long after he was out of high school, and from the apparent testimony and from his interview that he had not had sex till long after he graduated from college. I kind of took that as accurate, because he threw that out, and here's why I take it as accurate. Except for the crazy ones, the 3 or 4 or 5 crazy ones that crawled out of the woodwork claiming that he had done something, nobody that would have had legitimate dating sexual relationship with him ever came forward and said, no, I take exception to that. When we were 22, you know, we did spring break or whatever, and I had a sexual relationship, so he's lying. That didn't happen, and so I'm giving some credence to it. He claimed that he drank beer and that he drank too much beer, but he didn't have a blackout. And of course, he had to say, I didn't have any blackouts, because had he had a blackout, he wouldn't have remembered, he might not have remembered what he allegedly did, what others claimed he did with Blasey-Ford. But there are college classmates of his who claimed that they saw him on many occasions drinking buddies where he was inebriated to the point where he probably didn't know what was going on. So I watched a guy called the Legal Eagle, and frankly, I wasn't impressed. But that doesn't mean he's not an impressive guy. I wasn't impressed. It made me feel like all the crap that I had to deal with as a lawyer. People that engage in lawyerly bullshit. So anyway, he came up with 5 questions. The first question was, did he commit perjury? And the big discussion was whether he drunk too much beer, which I think was a legitimate question, and had gotten really drunk. Had there been any testimony or any witnesses who said that that had happened in the last dozen years while he was on the appellate court, I would have said, hey, there we go. There's a demeanor question that I don't like. When we're talking about 30 years ago, I drank too much in college. I was even thought to be something of a partygoer, a serious partygoer. I'm not now, but I can understand why that might have been an issue. And on the other hand, I can't see why that 35 years later applies to a guy that's going to the court unless it's still a problem. So, but the sex thing, as I say, I don't think it's clear that he didn't. And then there's this boofing flatulence thing. The question that this lawyer asked, this legal guy asked, was, did he commit perjury? And he went on and on about the claim that there was some discussion about the Devil's Triangle, and one of the Democrats was probing him about whether the Devil's Triangle, the definition of it, was 2 men and a woman engaged in sexual activity. And he responded by saying, no, it's a 3-glass drinking game. And this attorney made it sound like that's perjury in a substantive sense. And I would say to you, it isn't material information, number one. It's only material if his current state of being is seriously in question. That is, he's still drinking. And the fact that he forgot or misstated or misunderstood or even fibbed about what it was is of no issue, unless he was having sex, and of course the blackout thing applied. I looked it up, and of course there are spoofs about Kavanaugh using the Devil's Triangle and trying to create a drinking thing out of it when it obviously wasn't, when it was sexual. And then I found one that refers to the Bermuda Triangle as a drinking game with the 3 cups as he described it, which would have fit both Bermuda Triangle and Devil's Triangle. And it made more sense. I still don't know how to do it, and I guess at my age I don't need to, but to call that perjury is crap. The second question had to do with whether or not he has a judicial temperament, and whether or not, and I watched Judge Janine on that, which I thought was pretty funny. And the first thing about it is, what is a proper response when somebody's accusing you of sexually molesting a 15-year-old in a party 36 years ago? And where you say, I deny it, and if it's true that you did not do it, then the answer is righteous indignation up to the level of Jesus, for goodness sakes, tipping over the tables in the temple, in the synagogue, is a proper response. Anything up to that, I consider righteous indignation is anything up to tipping the tables over is all good, right? If you really truly have righteous indignation. And Janine made the comment, you know, anybody that would say that doesn't know what judges are like, and I will say the same thing. I remember one time testifying on an uncontested matter, and I was attempting to lay the foundation for the justification. I think it was a divorce, and it was no big deal. I was a brand new attorney, and this judge was down in the basement, and he was an elderly 80-year-old judge, and he was holding a file like this, and I started to have this person testify that had inconsistencies and problems, ongoing problems that justified the divorce. And I got about one sentence into it, and he took the file and slid it over, tossed it over to the clerk and said, divorce granted. He didn't want to hear any of that. And I knew I was in trouble, so I got the hell out of there. But that kind of demeanor is not exceptional for judges. You put a black robe on somebody, I don't know how the women are so much, but you put a black robe on a guy, and suddenly, for the first time in his life, people have to do what he tells them to do, and he's really self-important, and you have to tiptoe around him, and it is, yes, 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 oh yes, Your Majesty, exactly as you want it, with all due respect, sir. Would it be improper at this point to make a suggestion that we move to do such and such? I mean, it just gets to be horseshit, and I hated it. I just totally hated it. So then the next question this legal guy asked is about investigating Trump. Would he do that? Would he get into it? And I think if you watched Senator Collins' response, she demonstrated 2 or 3 occasions where he ruled against his own administrations or the administrations involved. And she said, he shows some judicial independence in those situations. Fourth, and I thought this was total craziness. As a matter of fact, I answered it similarly for one of the subs that put a comment in, and it is whether or not this is criminal, whether or not you could criminally prosecute the Blasey-Ford accusation. And I would say to you, the answer is, if somebody came in to me and said, here I've got this case, here's the folder, here are the problems with this person, and I've just already stated them, the 19 things wrong with her testimony, and we want to charge Kavanaugh with third-degree sexual assault. I would have, first of all, I know this witness does not stand up in trial. Secondly, I know that all of the facts about which there are questions take you away from probable cause. Third, this legal guy said, well, there's direct testimony and there is consequential testimony or circumstantial evidence, and this is direct evidence. Well, hell, it's hardly direct evidence, and the reason for it is that it is horribly weak, and it can be broken down in 17 different ways. It is very old. The claims that some of these senators are going to immediately go after this is just total crap, because nobody but an insane prosecutor would prosecute this. And frankly, hardly anybody would have prosecuted it 36 years ago. First of all, it would have been a juvenile matter. Secondly, there was at the very worst, there was kind of a molestation or a groveling around, wallowing around. I don't think she said she had been groped or that she had been fondled and there was nothing taken off, there was nothing ripped. I think you get really, really on the marginal edge of a sexual assault, and you might end up with just a simple assault, which is a non-sexual physical assault. That's possible. But I don't think you can make a sexual assault out of it, and I think 9 or 95 juries out of 100 would not find the person guilty for third-degree sexual assault in this kind of setting, even if assuming he was the adult. Now, when she gets younger, then that gets to be a little different matter. So finally, should he have requested that the FBI look into it, which of course the Democrats over and over and over and over again asked him, would you request a FBI investigation? Would you request that the White House ask for, would you request of the White House to extend another investigation? And as this guy pointed out, and as I will say, nobody in his right mind is going to say, yeah, investigate me for more stuff. They would say, as he did perhaps, if you need more information and that's something you request, I will be forthcoming. But nobody's going to volunteer to be more intensely investigated. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, to get to the end of it, it's all pretty ugly. And having Kavanaugh in the court is better than some things could be, but a lot worse than a lot of things could be. So he's not somebody I would have picked. And the process is not good, and the Democrats were abhorrent, and the Republicans were lame, and most of them were not very good. Thanks so much for watching. Give it a thumbs up.